Okay guys, so I'm back here again, taking a break from the wrestling again and talking about the top 10 at a certain position in Major League Baseball. Last time I talked about the top 10 right-handed pitchers. This time we are going to change it up and talk about the left-handed pitchers of the pitching category, the southpaws, if you will. So at number 10, I ranked C.J. Wilson of the Anaheim Angels. C.J. Wilson, since he's gone to Anaheim, hasn't really been the guy that he was in Texas. He's been very under the radar, though. He's still a top-notch pitcher. In Texas, he was looked at as the 1. I don't see him as a 1 anymore. I see him as a 2, maybe even a 3. I think the only reason why he's a 2 on the Angels is because of who they have, and the only other guy on that team that's really a great pitcher is Jared Weaver. Having said that, C.J. Wilson has been pretty consistent when it comes to his innings pitched, and he hasn't really gotten hurt, so, I mean, it's not like he's hurting them in any way. C.J. Wilson is at the point now where he's getting up there in age, so the decline is coming fairly soon. But having said that, some guys, even some guys on this list, for example, are older, but they are not falling just yet. Once again, though, this is a guy who was at one point a top pitcher in the American League. Now, he's a guy who just barely makes his top 10 list because of just the fact that he's not as good as he once was when he was with Texas, and you can start to see the decline. Moving on to number 9, we have Atlanta Braves lefty Mike Minor. Mike Minor, one of the most underrated pitchers in all of baseball. He's only been 2 years fully in the majors, but this guy has been dominant. Some call him the replacement to Tom Glavine. I wouldn't go that far, but Mike Minor's a guy who, on the Atlanta Braves staff, is a really good pitcher. I think he's a 2 to 3 type pitcher. I think he could be a low 2 but a high 3 on a team. This guy has been very consistent. He gets 30 starts a year, 200 innings in the 2 years so far. I mean, it's 2 years in, and like my last video, I'm not really high on the young guys yet, just because I don't trust with all the injury possibilities and such like that. But this guy, he looks like he could be the number 1 pitcher on the Braves coming up soon. I know they have a lot of contracts coming up, so this could be the guy that they look for to lock up and put as their ace. Mike Minor is a guy who also keeps the ball on the ground and is a strikeout guy. So, I mean, Mike Minor is a guy who can also be someone, if he is dealt, he could be a solid 2 on a contending team, like a team that's a big market that can afford pitchers. Having said that, I don't know what could possibly come next year. I'm hoping to see this guy elevate even more and come closer to that 20-game threshold that everybody sets the bar at, but we can only expect so much from a guy who's only going into his 3rd year. Next on my list is Boston Red Sox left-handed pitcher Jon Lester. Jon Lester. Now I'm a little biased here. I'm a Red Sox fan, no doubt about it. Go Sox. But Jon Lester, I can't put any higher than 8. I struggled with this because of my loyalty to the Red Sox. But at the same time, I'm more loyal to the baseball itself. Jon Lester had a great year this year, no doubt about it. I think his year is a little more overshadowed with the fact that he had a great postseason, and it makes his regular season look better because of that. Jon Lester, before this year, was struggling and was not a top 10 pitcher whatsoever. I would have not given him this nod, even being a Red Sox fan. But this year, he came out of his shell, stopped using that damn cutter so much that he fell in love with after Farrell left. And now that Farrell's back, maybe again in 2014, we see Jon Lester from the playoffs, that dominant pitcher that the Red Sox need as their ace. Jon Lester's a guy who needs to be the ace of the Sox at this point. Lackey's getting older, Buchholz is injured all the time, Peavy's a 1 and 2 year and done deal. I mean, we got pitchers coming up, but Jon Lester has to be that cornerstone. He's been good with the innings. He doesn't get hurt, which I really love. He always does 200 innings, 30 starts a year. He always wants the ball in the big game. But like I said before this, he was not a top 10 guy before this playoff run. Moving on to number 7, a guy who I think fell off a little bit this year is Philadelphia's left-handed pitcher Cole Hamels. Cole Hamels, before this year, signed that massive deal, NL Cy Young type guy, but this year it just was not there. He's still in my top 10, no doubt about it. His stuff is just unreal, but at the same time, this is a concern because this is a guy who just signed this massive deal, and I mean, yes, the Phillies sucked, no doubt about it, but at the same time, this guy needs to be that young star because Cliff Lee's not going to last much longer. Let's be real here. And Cole Hamels is supposed to be their ace for the rest, pretty much, of his career, and he needs to step up. I mean, he doesn't get hurt, so you know how I am. I love those guys. 200 innings, 330 starts, but at the same time, he's not consistent. He goes from superstar pitcher to mediocre year to superstar. Like I don't understand. And it was the same thing back when the Phillies made the World Series. He was dominant, mediocre, decent, mediocre, dominant. Now he's mediocre again. I don't understand it. You gotta stay consistent in some type of capacity. It's not like your stuff is changing. I mean, and the hitters obviously know what's coming. They're all professionals. Let's be honest here, but you gotta do something. I mean, you can't just be a guy who goes 1 year he's great, next year he sucks, next year he's mediocre, next year he's great. Like, you gotta have some type of consistency. If he develops the consistency, I think he can move up on this list and be one of the top pitchers in baseball. But once again, he's not doing that. It's just how Lester was with the cutter and things like that. Hamels is falling in love with things, and it's not working. Next on my list is Pirates left-handed pitcher Francisco Liriano. The resurrection of Francisco Liriano has been amazing so far since he's gone to Pittsburgh. I actually gave up on this guy when Minnesota got rid of him and sent him to Chicago. I thought this guy was done. It looked like he was going on the same route as a Johan type situation. I mean, Johan obviously lasted longer, but Liriano was his co-star, and it looked like Liriano was done. It looked like Liriano had nothing left. His slider was flat, his fastball was losing miles per hour, and he just looked awful. He goes to Pittsburgh, signs that 2-year deal that nobody really thought was anything, and this 2-year deal, he became, so far the first year, he was their ace. There's no doubt about it. I mean, yeah, A.J. Burnett was their big guy starter, but Francisco Liriano led them to the playoffs as starting pitcher. He did things that guys weren't doing. You're facing the Cardinals and the Reds, and that's a fairly tough division. And he was a guy that led that team to the playoffs in the rotation aspect. Having said that, we don't know what we're going to get from him this year. It's been years since he said back-to-back good years, so I'm not fully sold on him having a great year, but if I see it, this guy can move up again in the list. Obviously I didn't have him ranked last year, you can clearly tell that, but this is a guy who could be possibly top 5 next year. He's right on my top 5 this year, but if this guy keeps it up and stays with Pittsburgh, I really hope he doesn't leave Pittsburgh. I love the fact that Pittsburgh's great again, but this is a guy who can really, really elevate Pittsburgh and elevate himself, personally. Next on my list is Chicago White Sox left-handed pitcher Chris Sale. Chris Sale starts my top 5 here. I have a hard time putting Chris Sale here. Chris Sale's stuff, don't get me wrong, is amazing. It's great to watch this guy pitch, and it's a real treat. He's another young guy. He's with the White Sox. That team is just garbage right now. They've done great moves this offseason to get better and get younger. I just really hope that if this guy does get dealt, he goes to a team that's going to give him run support, because this guy has like a 2-something ERA this year, maybe a low 3. His strikeout rate is outrageous. His losses and win total, you can't really look at that sometimes, but at the same time, Chris Sale is a guy who can be possibly the best pitcher in baseball. He's got a large person to climb over in Kershaw, but he could be a guy, if he goes through the right situation, he could thrive and lead a team to the playoffs or even something bigger, maybe a World Series. But I don't see it with Chicago right now. I think he's going to be dealt from Chicago soon. If not this year, maybe next year, because I can't see him staying there. It just doesn't make sense. I could see him going to a team like the Angels, for example, and putting Weaver and him together. That'd be all right by me. But like I said, Chris Sale is a guy who really needs a lot right now, and he could be bumped up. Maybe he just had the sophomore type slump situation, but he needs to elevate next year. At number 4, we have San Francisco left-handed pitcher Madison Bumgarner, arguably the most underrated left-handed pitcher in baseball. This guy gets overshadowed by the fact that Tim Lincecum, who has not had a good year in almost 2 to 3 years now, gets overshadows Bumgarner. And Matt Cain, yeah, he had a little bit of an off year this year. He's still at an elite level, but Bumgarner gets so overrated, it's actually sickening. Bumgarner is the most consistent pitcher in that staff at 22 years old, 23 years old now. Bumgarner ever since he's come out to majors, has not missed a start. He 200 innings, 220 innings. Strikeout ratio is amazing. His ERA has not gone over 3.4, I'm pretty sure. And he doesn't give up runs. I mean, yes, San Fran Stadium is big, but at the same time, Bumgarner doesn't. His home and road splits are not that different. I mean, Bumgarner is a guy who, I mean, he's literally in the early stage of his 20s. How scary is that? We're almost talking like how Kershaw was when he first came up. I mean, Bumgarner has a lot of room to still develop, no doubt about it, but at the same time, Bumgarner can become a guy like a Kershaw, where those two guys could dominate baseball in the same division. I mean, that's just a treat. And we get to see it sometimes this year, too. Maybe we will. I can't wait if we get to see that. Number 3, we have left-handed pitcher of Tampa Bay. Well, not much longer in Tampa Bay, very likely, but David Price. David Price last year, it looked like his year was going to be really bad, and he got a blessing in disguise with that bicep injury that he had there. He came back. I actually saw him live, and he looked dominant. I actually saw him almost throwing no-hitter against the Red Sox, so I mean, his changeup was flat at the beginning of the year, but this is a guy who, since he's come up, he has been dominant. He has dominated in one of the most difficult divisions in baseball in the American League East, and he does not flinch. He goes right after hitters. He throws that changeup that is almost unhittable sometimes, and he just buries you inside, and there's nothing you can do about it. Having said that, he is not probably going to be with the Rays after this year. He's probably going to go to a team that's going to give him a ridiculous contract, Kershaw-type money, and he's going to start getting more wins. I hope that he gets more wins. I would assume if he's going to leave Tampa, it better be for a good reason. I mean, Tampa can't really afford him, but at the same time, I don't want to go to a team where he's not going to start getting wins, and his ERA is going to be still great, his K ratio is going to be great, but at the same time, he could become a mediocre almost pitcher because he'd be in a Chris Sale situation almost. David Price, I would put at 2, but David Price, I just couldn't put at number 2 because of the guy who at number 2 is probably the most consistent left-handed pitcher in baseball. And that, leading into that, is Phillies left-handed pitcher Cliff Lee. I briefly talked about Cliff Lee earlier when I came to Hamels. Cliff Lee literally does not walk people. It is weird. I don't understand. It's like he's playing a video game when he pitches sometimes. He literally throws that curveball that is it's just crazy to see. Cliff Lee also does not. I mean, since that year, I'm pretty sure in Cleveland, he had that one bad year where it was just a travesty. Ever since then, he's been one of the most dominant and most consistent pitchers in baseball on the left-handed side. Every year, 200 innings. I mean, this year he's also with the Phillies like Hamels. He had that issue where he's not getting any wins. Even the year before that, he wasn't getting wins at all. I mean, I think he maybe had like 5 wins. That's not, I mean, and like 20 no decisions. Put that guy on like a team like Detroit, the Dodgers, the Braves even. That's 17 and 19 wins. Cliff Lee is dominant, and he dominates the NL East. It's just whether or not he gets the W's or not. And number 1 is no surprise because he's got $30 million a year in his bank account. Good for him. And Clayton Kershaw of the Los Angeles Dodgers. Clayton Kershaw, what can you say about this guy? He is the Miguel Cabrera pitching right now. He is a man among boys. He is a guy who I feel like he's facing AAA guys, needs to be called up. There's really no else to call it. He is the modern day Sandy Koufax. As much as some people don't want to say that, he really is. He is that good. On the left-hand side, I really can't analyze pretty much like what he does because it's just too great. He literally, every time he goes out there, he has the same thing as Verlander, the no-hitter watch. The fact that you are going to see a treat every time he steps on the mound. And the odds of him losing are very slim. And if you're going to score 2 runs off him, just consider it very lucky. This year he had an under 2 ERA. That's amazing nowadays in baseball. But Clayton Kershaw wraps out my top 10. Guys, I'm just going to talk about real quick that didn't make my cut. That's maybe on some people they would be. One guy would be left-handed pitcher from the Washington Nationals, Gio Gonzalez. For some reason, I couldn't put Gio in there. I just think Gio only thrives on the fact that he's gotten the offense from Washington. Yes, he had over 20 wins last season, but I mean, he's a guy who has no pressure on him, and he is literally just. I mean, he is underrated. Don't get me wrong. He probably will be in my top 10 next year if he does this again. But I just couldn't put him in there. Another guy, CC Sabathia. This year, he dropped off the map for me. I couldn't put him in my top 10. He had a terrible year. I think he barely went over 500. that to me is not a top 10 left-handed pitcher. Some other guys, some other little type guys, Bruce Chen, obviously not going to make it. He didn't have a good enough year. And just guys like that, like Derek Holland from Texas, couldn't put him in it. Matt Harrison didn't make it in my cut either. Just guys that I couldn't put over some of these other guys because they're just not the consistent. I mean, we don't know what we're going to get from Harrison because both him and Harrison's coming off double back surgery. Who knows what we're going to get from him? And Derek Holland's out until at least July. So, I mean, I couldn't show the stats couldn't work for me in putting them in my top 10. But if you have any disagreements with my top 10, feel free to comment or explain your concerns or talk about why I messed up on this. I will gladly listen to your insight about it. If not, like and subscribe to the videos, and I will keep producing more. See you later.